cropping up a lot. We've got that choice specs, the very traditional form, and, well, speaking of Miraidon, it's actually front and center on the field for both of our trainers as we advance into our Masters top cut here at the North American International Championships. Both of them actually going for the mirror. They've partnered up with an Incineroar apiece.
Right, one Incineroar on either side, one Miraidon on either side, one Assault Vest on either side, but that's where the similarities end. Miraidon on the near side from Marcus has the Assault Vest, is going to play a little bit differently from the Miraidon on the other side, is able to stand up to more hits, but doesn't have quite the same damage potential. For instance, isn't threatening a KO onto the Incineroar on the other side that itself then has the Assault Vest and is more bulky, whereas Marcus's Incineroar much more threatened by the Miraidon on the other side. Of course, both players do have Fake Out available, can go after the respective Miraidons to try to keep them from getting the attacks off this turn.
Yes, and on Marcus' side as well, you do have some variations on that Incineroar, but we're going to be kicking things off straight away with the Terrestrialization out of the blocks here in this game one. It's going to be on the Miraidon. We've seen this time and time again throughout this tournament, Miraidon dropping its defensive weaknesses to opposing Miraidon and turning into that Fairy type so that it will take no damage from a potential Draco Meteor. Possibly then, we could be seeing the exact same thing happening across the field here. Federico and Marcus both locking into this on their Miraidons, making sure that Draco Meteor cannot be used on one side, but actually this one is that Electric Terror type, so this one is going to be trying to go all out on the offensive.
Helps fill in some of that offensive gap. How much can it get done, though, with a Fake Out coming in? But it's after the other Incineroar and not going to be able to flinch the Miraidon.
Yeah, the Rocky Helmet going to do a little bit of chip damage here. Of course, we know Federico's Miraidon cannot move here, but Miraidon on Marcus' side, it's unleashed and ready to go. It's got that Electric Terrestrialization to boost up this Electro Drift, and it will find its mark onto the opposing Incineroar and be able to get that knockout.
Well, I led into the turn saying the damage might not be there to pick up the KO in the Incineroar, but with the offensive Electric Terrestrialization, the damage comes through. Lands the KO into the Assault Vest Incineroar on the other side and pays no cost for it because the players weren't confident which Incineroar was going to be faster, and Federico took the risk to target the Fake Out into the Incineroar on the other side, but Fake Out landed after Incineroar had already faked out, giving the complete advantage over to Marcus and the 1-0 lead. But now that move has been locked into, but in Marcus's favor is locked in, where it does not have to be locked into, is able to switch attacks. The Fake Out on the other side means that that Miraidon hasn't locked in either.
And it's going to be that Draco Meteor finding its mark down onto the Incineroar, gets retaliation. Incineroars are down early on in this game for both of our trainers. Marcus not looking too happy by losing that pivotal piece in his team. But the Miraidon's still able to go for this Electro Drift. It has its choice of targets. It can go into this opposing Lunala and break that Shadow Shield. It's also got the Electric Seed boost up. That's not going to affect it in front of the special attackers, but it now does leave Lunala a lot more vulnerable going forward. Lunala, however, just throws Chaos into the realm and goes for a Trick Room.
The dimensions have been twisted. Should mean that Lunala would be the fastest of these three things to move, but Marcus can counter that, just bring in this Calyrex Ice Rider, which should now be the fastest thing to move on the field. The main defensive Terrestrialization against Calyrex Ice Rider already in play, though. The Miraidon is a Fairy type, no longer weak to Glacial Lance, and Lunala on the other side has Wide Guard to further shut down Glacial Lance. Lunala can also threaten Calyrex back, so you have a little bit of push or pull. Do you want to use the Lunala to do significant damage to Calyrex, or do you want to use it to stop the Glacial Lance from the other side? Meanwhile, the Miraidon on Federico's side has used Draco Meteor already, lowered its special attack, doesn't have quite the same damage potential, and has to worry that an Electro Drift from Miraidon is coming its way now that it no longer resists it. It's also probably the thing moving fastest on the field. We've seen it move before the Miraidon on Marcus's side twice, and pretty typical for a Choice Specs versus Assault Vest training. And so probably in the Trick Room, this has the disadvantage, but for now staying on the field.
Yep, no switches. Instead, just the Glacial Lance going to come through and connect onto both of Federico's Pokemon. Lunala moving second in this Trick Room environment can go for this Moongeist Beam. It finds its mark down on the opposing Calyrex. Despite being super effective, though, Calyrex stays in the game as Marcus is able to retaliate with this Electro Drift. Using that Electric Train and the Hadron Engine to boost itself up, it can connect down into Lunala and get a knockout onto one of Federico's restricted. But we got to remember, Federico did keep the Miraidon in play. We know that it's locked into this Draco Meteor, so it's not going to be doing a huge amount of damage, but still a little bit of chip can be devastating. The Calyrex, particularly considering it didn't have a lot of damage, a lot of HP remaining, it will secure a knockout apiece.
The players are both playing this with pace, just going out for KOs, exchange the Incineroars early on, and there, it's not a Wide Guard to stop the Glacial Lance coming from down, it's accepting the Glacial Lance in order to get the Moongeist Beam that enables Draco Meteor to then pick up that KO.
Well, Ditto joins the field, so we're going to see three Miraidons in play. Urshifu clearly didn't get the memo to the party here. But again, Federico's able to bring in that Choice Band Urshifu, and depending on how the speeds are going to interact amongst these Miraidons, Urshifu could be in a great position to get some damage on the board. But it has to watch out for the fact that there are two electric types opposing on that side of the field. Close combat comes through. That's what it has locked into with its Choice Band. It's left itself more vulnerable with its defenses dropping as well after that attack, enabling Marcus's Miraidon to retaliate with this Electro Drift, but it finds its counter into the opposing restricted.
Electro Drift picks up the KO there into the Terra Fairy Miraidon. Choice Band Urshifu now just vulnerable to the Ditto on the other side.
Yep, exactly. Getting all tongue-tied there on the match itself. Ditto is able to go for the Electro Drift, will be able to find his mark down into the opposing Urshifu and get that one-hit KO. I don't think anybody was doubting that wasn't going to be able to get the knockout, however.
Plenty of damage there. The Urshifu just not really positioned in the right spot at the end of the game, didn't have a KO available to it despite the choice band, and had no protection against the double electrics on the other side. The game just kind of simplified down in a way that wasn't in Federico's favor. The Miraidon was stuck on the other side at lowered special attack, unable to get off the field and reposition. The Urshifu couldn't protect itself, couldn't switch out either, and so they just went down. I think all those early trades just ended up working out in Marcus's favor, especially that turn of Glacial Lance plus Electro Drift to pick up Lunala.
I think all these little elements of speed were kind of weaving like a willow throughout the match in order to try and gain momentum right from the very beginning as well, with those fake out turns coming through from the Incineroars. Additionally as well, I like the way Federico kept the Miraidon in play to get these knockouts. You KO the Incineroar this turn, you could utilize it on the Calyrex Ice Rider in the next turn, but then unfortunately it just was not dealing enough damage, and in a counter way, Marcus's own Miraidon with that electric terrestrialization as well was just so formidable on the field. By dropping as well the Dragon typing, you didn't have to worry as much about Draco Meteor, and it just gave Marcus, I think, a lot more flexibility in play.
Right, it stayed on the field for all of those turns completely healthy. Had it been damaged at some point, then maybe Urshifu has that KO available to it. But because it just stayed untargeted for so long, putting out so much damage, it can eventually easily close out that game. And part of the reason that it was never targeted is the Assault Vest kind of dissuaded the offense there. The Draco Meteor into the Assault Vest, the Moon Geist Beam into the Assault Vest, they aren't going to do quite the damage. And despite that defensive itemization, Marcus was still finding the necessary damage from his own side.
And the Trick Room as well made it a little bit difficult for Federico to utilize, but looks like we're going to have an exact run back here of Game 1. Incineroar and Miraidon out front and center for both of these trainers, but whether or not they're going to be able to take the knowledge learned from Game 1 about the speeds, we'll have to find out.
The Intimidate comes from Marcus's Incineroar first, this time consistent with the fake out speed that we saw in the last one. Both terrestrializations ended up getting used on turn 1 in Miraidons in the first game. Wouldn't be surprised to see a repeat of that. Both Miraidons very vulnerable to each other as long as they stay a Dragon and Electric type. But if you can kind of call your opponent's bluff, say you're not really going to put that attack into Miraidon anyway and not have to spin the terrestrialization, it could be a valuable resource save for later.
Well, I'm not surprised to see some sparkles get on the stage amongst these trainers. Once again, a turn 1 terrestrialization coming through from Marcus here. In the previous game, though, we did see the opposing Miraidon go for the terrestrialization first, so possibly indicating that Federico is not going to be terrestrializing here, and that's exactly the case. The fake out will go down into that opposing restricted, and it looks like the Incineroar on the other side is going to echo and mirror the exact same play. So no big damage coming through, but at least from Federico's side, you can see that Marcus has played the terrestrialization card.
Right, only one terrestrialization used, fake out exchanged. Kind of an interesting position that if Marcus had opted to fake out the Incineroar on the other side, Miraidon would have been able to attack and might have had a chance to attack the unterrestrialized Miraidon on the other side. We'll have to see if Miraidon stays unterrestrialized on this turn as Incineroar flees to the back.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of board rotation here for Marcus. As he brings the Ditto into play, we're seeing a little more early doors in this game too, because it can capitalize on the fact that there isn't a Miraidon on the opposing side, and we're kind of back in the same situation we saw at the end of that Game 1. 3 Miraidons on the field and 1 other Pokemon. Draco Meteor is a move of choice though, and it's going to catch the Ditto switching in, but it is rocking that Focus Sash, so it will give it a little bit longevity on the field. It is going to be able to eat that up and reduce, of course, the special attack thanks to that move on the Miraidon on Federico's side. Miraidon on Marcus' side, however, going for that Electro Drift, it's going to be able to find its mark down against the opposing Incineroar here, using that Electric Terrain to try and get a significant amount of damage on the board, really weakening it up for later plays. But Incineroar able to stay in the game, can go for the U-turn, switch up, and allow Federico to adjust the board position with these 2 new restrictors in front.
We see the same offense from both players on turn 2 that we saw before. The Draco Meteor into what was the Incineroar for Marcus, but this time it's the Ditto taking that spot with the Focus Sash, maybe the best thing to take, because we saw that Draco Meteor just KO Incineroar previously. Meanwhile, Electro Drift goes into Incineroar, and where it picked up the KO in the last game, after some damage had gone down, this time isn't able to. The Incineroar stays relatively healthy, gets off the field, and now Lunala is in. But a big advantage for Marcus that this time as Lunala hits the field, and Incineroar is still lurking in the back. One of Lunala's kind of worst enemies here.
That's something you have to be cognizant of for sure. We are going to see the Draco Meteor come through from the Miraidon Ditto into that opposing Lunala and breaking the focus sash. Ditto will be KO'd here. Looks like Marcus is very happy to see this play, possibly indicating that the Lunala, not the Lunala, the Miraidon with the electric terrain is going to be targeting down into possibly Lunala, trying to remove it from play with this Electro Drift. You're going to be able to find your mark using the electric terrain into that Shadow Shield broken Lunala. So much damage on the board, and it will secure the knockout. That's exactly what Marcus wanted from this turn.
Simply enough damage to massive Miraidon, doing damage into Lunala. One goes down. I know, a little bit fortunate for Marcus there to win the speed tie. The Ditto had transformed into exactly the same speed as the Miraidon on the other side, but still gets to move first and put that Draco Meteor into Lunala, and then just go down. That means that the Miraidon on Federico's side now is at -4 special attack. Really, with that Assault Vest on the other side, Incineroar being fairly bulky here is not much of a threat to either of these Pokemon. Is going to need to go off the field. So not only is Federico down in Pokemon here, but also down in pace. I guess even in Pokemon, but down in the significance of those Pokemon with Lunala already gone. But then down in pace, because Miraidon's going to need to leave the field. That means kind of the fake out coverage that you have this turn can only protect that switch. Meanwhile, Marcus is free to continue to hound Federico with the Electro Drift, with attacks from his own Incineroar.
Well, this is something you said in Game 1 is how important pace was in this set, and Game 2 is turning out to be exactly the same story. We are going to see an adaptation from Federico, those switching Pokemon out on the field to bring in these Ursaluna, as Fake Outs are just traded across by one Incineroar into the opposing one that's going for this knockoff. That's a great call here. You're able to knock off the Flame Orb onto that opposing Ursaluna, meaning it's not going to get that Guts boost for free.
Two significant things here. First, in Game 1, we saw the Trick Room from Lunala, but there was not much follow-through on it. So Federico makes the adjustment to have the Ursaluna available, to have more follow-through from the Trick Room, but Lunala never got the chance. Just got doubled up and KO'd. Means Ursaluna is really stuck here. And it's even more stuck here because it takes the knockoff on the switch-in because of that pace disadvantage that Federico was at after needing to switch the -4 Miraidon out. So Ursaluna pays the cost for that. Switches into a knockoff, loses its Flame Orb, and loses both its offensive firepower not being burnt and the speed advantage with not having Trick Room available to it.
I think if the Incineroars had traded Fake Outs like I was anticipating, it could have been great for Federico, free switch in, getting that burn up, but just was not to be. Instead, forced to make another adaptation, bringing the Incineroar off the field so it can Fake Out later on, but bringing that Miraidon back into the fray. Miraidon on Marcus' side is able to go for the Volt Switch, so again, Marcus able to get a pivot out of his own, but with damage on the field as well, enabling that little bit of chip constantly into the opposing Pokemon on Federico's side, and now gives him the opportunity to bring in a Pokemon like Calyrex that can threaten with those Glacial Lances.
The ground offense on the other side means there's still significant damage here. Ursaluna is threatening Miraidon and Incineroar quite a lot, and Miraidon has still got a lot of firepower with those choice specs.
Exactly, and Ursaluna, you know, unfortunately is going to have its attack lowered to add a little bit of insult to injury, as Incineroar also takes a leaf out of this adaptation book and is able to rotate off the field. Miraidon's able to rejoin now, and again, Marcus in a position where you can apply pressure going forward into this next turn. The electric Terrestrialization really giving it extra power against Pokemon like the opposing Miraidon. Ursaluna, however, actually is finally going to be able to have a say in this match. Gets the knockout onto the Miraidon, forcing Marcus actually into 2 Pokemon remaining, so we know that Incineroar is going to be forced to come through and support this Calyrex.
Lands the headlong rush into the right spot. Marcus hoping that between switching the Calyrex in there and then getting the parting shot first to lower the attack one stage, Calyrex probably would have taken that headlong rush quite well. But instead it's Miraidon who has to take it and easily go down. The good news is that Incineroar comes back in here again. Now Ursaluna is at -2 attack, and without such a juicy target as the Miraidon on the other side, can now offer Fake Out into Miraidon that can cover a Glacial Lance that would hurt both of these Pokemon quite a bit. Incineroar very low in the back probably also goes down to Glacial Lance if it comes in.
And you know the Miraidon on Federico's side cannot protect either because it has that choice spec, so it is going to be a very vulnerable target. At least on Federico's side, you have 3 Pokemon, you have the utility to switch one out, and the choice is going to be on that Ursaluna, trying to keep it nice and safe, bringing in that Incineroar. It can go for that Intimidate, try and do some damage into the opposing Incineroar. It can obviously connect down onto the Calyrex. This is the leftovers variant, not the clear Amulet, so that will weaken some of the offensive pressure that Marcus is not able to get rid of because he does not have the flexibility to switch out. Terrestrialization does finally come through for Federico, and once again it is going to be on this Miraidon, so it's going to be dropping its weakness to the Dragon types, turning into a Fairy, will be taking a little bit of chip with the Fake Out, but then it really comes down to what this opposing Calyrex is going to go for. Glacial Lance will come through and connect into both targets, but they're going to be able to take it really well.
Incineroar manages to hang on. I think that's quite significant so that it can offer Fake Out on this turn. Miraidon finally has to use the Terrestrialization to make sure it doesn't go down to the Glacial Lance on that turn. Incineroar probably wouldn't have taken Fake Out and Glacial Lance if it had tried to switch into the Miraidon slot.
That's true.
And so managed to keep both Pokemon around with that play. But significant that Electric Terrain's not around here. Going to be maybe need to get Miraidon off the field again to get the sheer damage. Otherwise, the Incineroar and Calyrex look like pretty healthy targets for a Miraidon that does not have Electric Drain.
Well, Marco's switching things onto the defensive now, going for the Protect with the Calyrex, as Miraidon just goes straight for the Draco Meteor into the opposing Incineroar. Now that it was able to reset those drops from earlier, it gets a solid one-hit KO of damage, leaving Marcus with just the Calyrex on the field. I think Marcus was shocked to see that, judging by his expression. Incineroar trying to pivot off, but to no avail.
Maybe surprised at the damage, maybe surprised at the move selection, but really significant. The Miraidon manages to do that while Federico still has the Pokemon in the back. That means that the Miraidon can just flee to the back if it wants to. Otherwise, maybe it's just enough damage with Incineroar and the Miraidon moving first. Probably, though, Ursaluna is going to move after a Calyrex if they end up against each other later on. And so, yeah, you need to preserve the Miraidon to make sure you have the full power of an Electric Drain boosted Electro Drift to follow through.
Exactly, and you can bring the Ursaluna back in. It could be detrimental for it, but as you said, the key thing is keeping that Miraidon nice and safe in the back. You can bring that Electric Train back to the field as well. Glacial Lance will come through, however. It is going to be able to get the knockout onto the Incineroar, but Ursaluna actually able to hang on as well. Those Intimidates from Incineroar earlier really weakening the offensive capabilities of this Calyrex and putting Federico into a great position to close out this game.
Should have the damage to do it with Electro Drift from the other side. Like you mentioned, the Intimidate. Without the Clear Amulet, this more defensive set that both has leftovers instead of Clear Amulet and is trained to be more defensive, doesn't have the offense to just get the KO on Miraidon, but it wouldn't have mattered if it did, because the Miraidon was just going to finish through with Electro Drift.
Well, Marcus sees what's happening, locks in that forfeit, so Federico's going to take game 2, even the score, and once again, Len, we have a game 3. I always love to see it at this level of competitive play. I mean, you mentioned pace was very, very important in this particular game. Where do you think Marcus lost the pace and where Federico was able to gain that momentum in this game too?
Yeah, it felt like things were just flying back and forth so quickly. But I think at the position where, even though it felt like Ursaluna came on the field relatively poorly positioned, because those two targets on the other side were weak to ground. I mean, didn't have to rely on Facade for that offense, so the lack of burn didn't hurt it as much. And those were two vulnerable enough targets that they were going to go down to Headlong Rush. And then when the Headlong Rush was targeted correctly so that it finished the KO onto Miraidon, things really swung back into Federico's favor, because Marcus was the first player down to only 2 Pokemon who lost the flexibility to switch around. With kind of the missing protects across both of these teams, the being down to only 2 Pokemon can be so limiting.
And I think as well we saw in that game too that Federico in particular was really trying to switch Pokemon up, whether it was switching them off with a U-turn or just doing the hard switches with the Miraidon as well. Switching up that ball position was critical. I like the observation with the Ursaluna, because I think when I saw it come in and take that knockoff, it was like, this is devastating, this is not the strategy you normally want to go for. But as you mentioned, just having that ground typing, you can still apply so much pressure, particularly when Ditto keeps wanting to turn into Miraidons as well. But I think I've seen this story before, Miraidon Incineroar lead for both of our trainers here in Top Cut.
We've seen it a couple times. We'll see it probably some more. The Miraidons up against each other. Now, let's remember back in Game 1, both immediately used Terrestrialization. In Game 2, Federico preserved the Terrestrialization and probably ended up being significant because the Miraidon then later switched into a Volt Switch and 4 times resisted it as an Electric and Dragon type. If it had been a Fairy type instead, that would have been the damage to let Glacial Lance later KO that same game.
You've got to keep thinking about where these damage stacks up, whether it's set earlier in the game or whether it's a double target in a particular turn. You have to get those damages on the board to get the knockouts, but it looks like Marcus is committing with the Terrestrialization on this Miraidon 3 times in a row in this set, trying to make sure that it's going to have extra offensive capabilities as well as not having to worry so much about Draco Meteor. You don't have to worry about it at all if your Incineroar is able to go for that fake out to the opposing Miraidon. That's exactly what both of these Incineroars are doing. Just a very slow turn 1 here.
So far, we're on Game 2 script. This is exactly how we started the last game. It'll be interesting to see if both players, kind of where they deviate from that script. Last time it was Incineroar switching out to Ditto to try to get the transformation, but this time the same play isn't available. Incineroar is opposite Incineroar. So if you switch the Incineroar out to Ditto, you'll just have a second Incineroar on the field instead of a third Miraidon joining the play, which is much more difficult to play with. So Marcus has to be looking for other options. Meanwhile, Federico's shown a high propensity to just throw those Draco Meteors at Incineroar, look for the KO. Got it in Game 1. Didn't get it on the first try, Game 2, but then eventually got the KO. Let's see it again, but this time it's the Draco Meteor in the other slot and not the KO into Miraidon.
I mean, it's got its glasses on where it's able to connect these Draco Meteors, but this time, as you mentioned, not able to get the knockout. Miraidon on Marcus' side, however, is going to try and show the opposing Miraidon how it's done with this Electric Drift into the Incineroar, but again, not able to get the knockout without a little bit of additional damage. Incineroar tries to get that with the U-turn, but again, to no avail. Both of the Miraidon's able to take this damage, and Federico able to go for an adaptation here, switching that Incineroar into the back, gives him free utility to bring in something maybe even like the Ursaluna onto the field. It's in a position now where, unless a knockoff is going that way, which it was, but not into that slot, it's able to this time get the burn boost up.
Interesting to see the knockoff go into the Miraidon, maybe expecting a switch in that spot. Does some good damage in the Miraidon, but does open up switching moves. Means the Miraidon could just try to volt switch itself off the field now that the choice specs aren't there, limiting it to Draco Meteor. Meanwhile, this time Ursaluna is successfully burnt. Comes onto the field without taking a knockoff, and is once again facing two ground-weak Pokemon that cannot afford to take a headlong rush. And there's not a lot of really bulky options in the back for Marcus. We can see the Calyrex and the Ditto both don't really want to take a guts-boosted headlong rush, maybe even after you get a parting shot to try to weaken it some. Ursaluna also a kind of a poor target for Ditto, because while you'll copy the abilities and moves, you won't copy the Flame Work. So you don't end up burnt and you don't have that same offensive boost.
I think as well there's some advantages to losing your choice specs. Yes, you're not dealing as much damage, but at least you have some flexibility to pick between moves. That could be something that could be helpful to Federico. But we're going to see Marcus bring in this Calyrex Ice Rider. So again, trying to bring the Restricted onto the field to apply pressure with these Glacial Lances. So I think this is a very wise terrestrialization coming through on the Miraidon once again here for Federico. Dropping that Dragon weakness to those ice moves, turning into the Fairy type does give it a lot more capabilities on the field to stay in the game. It also enables a boost to this Dazzling Gleam. It's going to be able to hit both of Marcus's Pokemon. Significant damage on the Incineroar thanks to that critical hit and a little bit of chip into Calyrex. Incineroar, you know, saying you did get your burn, guts activation here, but I'm going to still lower your attack by one stage and try and neutralize you as best I can.
Really significant critical hit. You know, the lack of choice specs opens up the option for Dazzling Gleam, just looking to finish off Miraidon and get some chip into whatever switches in otherwise. Because of the critical hit, now Incineroar, a very valuable Pokemon in this match. Valuable enough that Federico's been willing to commit Draco Meteor to it 3 times so far, is down to 58 health, just about a quarter of its health. It's going to not have nearly the same staying power if it has to come in and fight something like the Lunala later on.
Looks like the Miraidon might be on borrowed time though on Marcus's side. It manages to avoid the Facade. That goes into the Calyrex, does a significant chunk of damage to it. And Calyrex, it is that bulkier one where it's got the leftovers. It has the potential to even go for a Leech Seed later on. But at the pace these trainers are playing at, I don't think it's going to be able to have the time granted to it to set that up.
Right, Miraidon may be meant to come in sacrificially just to take whatever Ursaluna was doing, but because it's stuck on the field, we know slower than the Miraidon against the other side, just very vulnerable. And a Dazzling Gleam will just pick up that KO and means that slot can't really attack. Calyrex might then be able to get an attack off, but to what target and how mitigated will it be by that point if Incineroar comes back in?
Yep, Ursaluna just switching out. It can reset the drop that it took from the parting shot earlier, and Lunala as Restricted could come on and enjoy the fact that the electric terrain is there to boost up that electric seed. That will help it in the face of that Calyrex, and Miraidon already knows it's in a position, like you said, it's faster. It can deal with this opposing Miraidon so that the Lunala can feel safe. It doesn't have to contend with something Miraidon can send its way, and it has now the defensive capabilities to deal with anything potentially that the Calyrex wants to throw forward.
Marcus just feels one step behind in this game so far, but gets a really valuable Glacial Lance here, picks up some damage. It seems to be one step behind all of the adjustments. In game 2, got the Incineroar pivot out into a full health Incineroar or rather the Incineroar pivot out into a full health Miraidon and just lost it. This time it was the Incineroar pivot out to a very low health Miraidon, maybe hoping the same play would happen. But the positioning loss when the KO didn't go into Miraidon, instead damage went into Calyrex, was really devastating.
I think this is interesting as well for the Ditto. This time it's not the Restricted Miraidon, but it's going to be turning into a Lunala. It's at this full HP. We know it's got that Focus Sash as well, so it has some flexibility.
Also still has Shadow Shield. Now Focus Sash and Shadow Shield a little bit redundant, but means it is not as vulnerable on this turn. If it can again win the speed tie and target down the Lunala on the other side, there's no Terrestrialization available to protect that Lunala, and could get good damage, but there are 2 good resistances in the back of that Lunala slot, but no switches.
Well, I think with Shadow Shield, Focus Sash, you want to try and make sure that this Lunala is going to be utilized in this position, and one way for Federico to stop that from happening is to chip that Shadow Shield and that Focus Sash in combination with that Volt Switch. Not only does it successfully reduce the defensive capabilities of the Lunala, but it allows you this pivot into the Incineroar. The Intimidates going down against this Calyrex, weakening it further, being able to apply pressure with the Fake Out in the next turn, as Ditto can move here, go for the Moongeist Beam, taking to the skies, and will find its mark down onto that opposing Lunala and absolutely remove it from play.
2 really significant speed ties for Ditto so far in this match. You have to imagine the Lunala on the other side was hunting Lunala on this side. There's no protect, no switch to Ursaluna or Incineroar in that slot. Instead, Lunala stays vulnerable and takes a Moongeist Beam from its duplicate over on Marcus's side.
Yep, Miraidon able to rejoin the field on Federico's side. This is going to be able to set that electric terrain, using the Hadron engine again to apply a lot of pressure, but you have to really pick your targets here because Ditto is threatening.
Ditto is threatening, but the health bars are starting to look fairly low for Marcus. Incineroar in the back cannot take a hit from Miraidon. Calyrex is now low enough that with Miraidon's special attack not lowered, it cannot take a health hit. And no Pokemon on Marcus' side is going to move before something on Federico's side unless some kind of retransformation into Miraidon happens. That makes it really difficult to safely get an attack off when you're being hunted by Miraidon at all times. Incineroar also has Fake Out available this turn, further limiting your options. And with Shadow Shield broken, we saw the damage into an actual Lunala earlier. The damage into Ditto Lunala is just going to be greater. So Miraidon should be threatening a KO into this Lunala.
Well, the seconds are ticking down. Marcus possibly out of options, but the Draco Meteor will find its mark, remove the Ditto from play. Yes, you are going to be weakening your defenses, and something like the Calyrex can come through, but Incineroar is going to be in a prime position to try and deal damage to it with that Flare Blitz. You don't even need to slow it down when you know you outspeed. No Fake Out needed. Flare Blitz will get the job done, meaning that Marcus only has that Incineroar in the back to deal with the 3 remaining Pokemon on Federico's side.
Yeah, and that's just it. There's no way for it to happen, right? Incineroar will eventually lose to this Miraidon. Wouldn't be surprised to see Federico take all odds out of it by getting Miraidon off the field to reset the move selection and make sure that Electro Drift is at full power. And meanwhile, Incineroar is just a sitting duck, cannot take a 3v1. So instead, Marcus just concedes the match and is knocked out of the tournament as Federico moves into the top 16.
Incredible plays from both of these trainers. It always brings me joy and happiness to see a Ditto on the field, but Federico knew a way to work around it. Even when Marcus was able to, on occasion, have 3 restricted Pokemon in play, Federico had a way to deal with it. Constantly looking at the speed interactions, constantly looking at the ball position. His adaptations through games 2 and 3 make him a worthy victor in this set.
Really strong play to win, despite losing those speed ties to the Ditto on the other side, but just finding a way to make those trades